How to co-parent with a narcissist? That is the question we'll be addressing today on the Mental Health Toolbox. And as therapists, we are very much accustomed to treating clients with going through a divorce, life transition, marital issues. We deal with a lot of children who came from broken homes or challenging homes. And something we come across on occasion is dealing with breakups or co-parenting around narcissism or relationships with a narcissist. And so this is a very special topic. And I know narcissism is a word that gets thrown out there a lot and sometimes is overused. But in today's episode, we actually have a specialist who will be talking with us about how to co-parent with a narcissist. And also if you're the child of a narcissist or that type of household, how you can deal with some of the ramifications of that, how you can reparent yourself and live your best life, of course. So, without further ado, let's meet Susie Miller-Wendel. Susie is a co parenting coach. She's an author and trauma recovery coach specializing in narcissistic abuse. She works with people who have been affected by narcissistic abuse, both in relationships and at the hands of a parent. She's also a public speaker and content creator on her YouTube channel, Susie Miller-Wendel, where she creates videos about narcissistic abuse, single parent life, and trauma recovery. So let's meet Susie. Hey, Susie,
Hello.
welcome to the Mental Health Toolbox. Thanks for
Thank
making time.
you. Thank you for having me and thanks for the introduction. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. So glad to have you on today to talk about this
I'm
topic.
glad to be here.
We talk a lot about parenting, we talk about co-parenting, we talk about marital advice and relationship tips, and I've had other experts on the channel around these subjects, but never someone who talks specifically to this population around co-parenting with a narcissist or narcissistic traits, right? And this is a
Mhm.
very special kind of population for a lot of different reasons we'll get into, and requires a little extra TLC in how we massage these these avenues of parenting, right?
Definitely. It does. Yes. I'm glad I could
Wonderful.
be here because there are really so many people that are affected by this, coming out of abusive relationships. And, you come out of these relationships, and I know that was the case for me, breathing a sigh of relief, like finally, I can move on, I can move forward. But oftentimes when you share children, most often if you're divorcing someone who has a lot of narcissistic traits, it oftentimes gets worse before it gets better. So I'm really passionate about the topic and just helping to educate people about how to manage that situation, what they should be focused on as they move out of that relationship and start down their own path of healing, and just how to be the best supportive parent they can be for their kids. So those are the things that I really like to speak to. So I'm
Yes,
glad I
and
could be here.
it helps when you're passionate about the work you do, and I can tell that you are, and you've really deep dove into this
Yeah.
niche, if you were, and so much so that you're an author on the
Yes.
subject.
Fresh.
And because we believe in tools up front here at the Mental Health Toolbox, anyone who wants to find out your book that you just published, if you want to check that out, Nurturing After Narcissism, Raising Thriving and Resilient Children After Divorcing Our Narcissist. You can check that out. It's go through her website, susiemillerwendel.com, and see the other offers she has there, including her coaching, right? Of course.
Right. Yep.
And yeah,
Yeah, and the
wonderful,
book's on
wonderful resources.
Amazon.
Mhm.
Book is on Amazon and Kindle, so it is there as a resource for people who need it.
Fantastic.
So
So make sure to put all of that up in the show notes for anyone who wants to learn more about the work you're doing over there.
awesome.
So yeah, so let's jump in. I'm curious, how did you get into this work? I know you're a certified trauma specialist, trauma
Hmm.
recovery specialist. Uh, did you go this direction specifically because of your passion with co-parenting and narcissism, or was that something that you were practicing beforehand and then kind of veered your way into this niche?
No, it's really always been my main area of focus. Just using my own life experiences to help people. I spent 17 years in corporate America, so I did the corporate grind. I left my
Mhm.
job back in 2020 and started down the path of real estate investing, and I did that for a few years, and I still do that.
Hmm.
I did a lot of hands-on renovation work. And while I had that time to, I was hammering away on these projects, it just gave me time to really think about, again, my own life experiences and how I could use those to actually help people. Looking back, I was separated over 10 years ago, so it's pretty far back in my rearview mirror. But I think as you move further away, you realize how much you've learned, and how, again, a person fresh in that situation just they don't know how to navigate those things. So I was really, inspired to just try to start learning more about, again, how that type of abuse affects people, how it can show up in the family system and the family life, and arm myself with more information. So I went through the trauma recovery coaching certification, again, just to build my knowledge, and took some courses around narcissistic abuse as well, just to build that further. So that's what kind of has brought me to where I am today. Really, like you said, that's my niche. That's kind of my area of specialty.
That's
So,
fantastic. I mean, that's no small thing, to retool, right?
right.
Learn, specialize, like, and then to
Yeah.
write a book. That's a
Yeah.
lot, on
Yes.
top of life. And
Yeah.
so I
But it's
appreciate
been
your
really,
commitment to that so you can serve this population. Thank
thank you.
you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's been rewarding. So,
absolutely.
yeah.
So that begs the question, as we dive in here, we're going to be talking about some of the fundamentals, right, of how to co-parent, right?
Yeah.
What else would you like our listeners to really kind of hone in on today? Like, what's if you were to give some kind of coffee table advice to someone, going through a breakup with a narcissist, like, kind of what's top of mind? What would you say is kind of important for them to understand about these waters?
Um, I think first and foremost, what we were going to plan on talking about when we, at the start of this show, is protecting yourself. Once you're free of that situation, once you're out of that situation, it's so important that you try to go as low or no contact with that person as possible, so that you can begin the healing process. One of my big aha moments didn't happen until probably 7 or 8 years after I got separated, was just how much that abuse had affected me.
Hmm.
I didn't realize, you think about domestic violence and you think about physical violence, but domestic violence is also emotional abuse and this narcissistic abuse, and it actually does have an effect on you. It has an effect on your body, on your brain, on your nervous system. And that was a big blind spot for me until I still started really learning about trauma and how people are affected by trauma. So it's so important that you, again, try to go as low or no contact with that person, so you can start focusing on your own healing and moving forward with your life. um, and whether you're a parent or don't have kids, you've got to take that time to heal, um, and start to feel better.
Yeah,
So,
well, I
yeah.
appreciate that. So, I mean, that's I think it's important to highlight that, trauma, and we've heard of PTSD, right? That
Hmm.
is post-traumatic, meaning there's a delayed or cumulative kind of response,
Right.
right? And it sounds like that was kind of your experience in being in a toxic relationship, that you didn't realize how toxic it was until sometime after getting out of the situation. What were your tells? Like, how
Right.
did you know it had taken a toll on you? Like, what were your signs and symptoms?
Um, I saw it show up in my work life a lot. So at the time, I was still trying to, work a 50+ hour corporate job, 50 hours a week corporate job, be a single parent, just manage life. But I saw a lot of it showing up in just how I felt at work, and trying to keep myself together at work, trying to remember things, trying to, um, yeah, I felt a lot of brain fog, a lack of motivation, which I think can be kind of an outcome of going through years and years of abuse. Just that general apathy about life, and not caring as much about things that I had really cared about before. And I also noticed a lot of disruption to my nervous system, where small things that were small, looking back, would really trigger me and set me off. Where previously I was just like a very calm person. It took a lot to rattle me. I
Mhm.
definitely noticed that I was really easily pushed into that like fight or flight type, reaction to things. I think those are probably the main things that I was feeling, but I don't think I realized why I was feeling them until even, years later, where I started learning about how trauma can cause these types of.
Sounds a lot like depression too.
Yeah. Yeah.
For
When I looked at like complex PTSD symptoms, that was, I could check the box on almost all of them. So,
yeah.
yeah.
How long were you in that relationship for?
It was in total about 13 years. So,
Yeah, that's a good stretch.
yeah. Yeah. And then the years following the divorce, like I said, oftentimes it gets worse before it gets better. So, the extent of the abuse can linger when you share children.
I'm saying you
So,
share children, it's not like a clean break. I mean, you always have to
exactly.
have this person more or less in your life to different
Right.
extents.
Yeah. You're connected and have to try to find a way to manage that relationship.
Sure.
So,
yeah.
So
maybe we can jump into that. I know you have a lot to share and a lot we
let's talk
can
about it.
dive into.
I would love that.
Walk through.
That
So
sounds
anyone on Instagram, forgive me, I'm going to be showing the slide, so I can't see your comments at the moment. I'll be kind of eyeballing that as we go. Okay. It's the one platform that doesn't quite integrate with StreamYard yet with the comment section. All right. Okay. So the 4 fundamentals of co-parenting with a narcissist.
Yes.
Let's talk about that.
Yeah. So these are things that I view as 4 important things to be keeping in mind. If you've gone down the path of divorce and are trying to figure out how this co-parenting situation can work with your ex. And I have co-parenting in quotes because oftentimes, the majority of the times, it's difficult to actually co-parent. Co-parenting stands for cooperative parenting. And I have this in another slide in terms of why co-parenting doesn't work, but we know overall, life can be made difficult by someone who has a lot of narcissistic traits. So these things are important to keep in mind. First of all, is just restricting communication as much as you can. Narcissistic people will continue to try to abuse you, like we've talked about, through text messages or trying to get you on the phone or trying to have in-person conversations with you. And oftentimes it's just a platform for them to further emotionally abuse you. So my recommendation on communication post separation and divorce is using a third-party app. There's several out there, but Our Family Wizard is one that's been around for years and years and years, and it's a great platform to use.
I know that one's popular with the courts, the family courts.
Yes, it is. Yeah, it's a very well-respected platform to use for communication. So I recommend using that and really sticking to it, avoiding getting, again, pulled into phone conversations, text messages, things like that. If the third-party app, for whatever reason, can't be used, then I would recommend using email and having a dedicated email just for communication with your co-parent. And that's really, there's several reasons for doing that. Number one is to protect your peace. You don't want to constantly be checking your emails and having that, anxiety well up every time you see an email in your inbox, with all your other things coming in throughout the day. So if you have a dedicated email, you can just set up, a certain time of day or a couple times a day to go into that email and see if anything has come through from your ex. And it also can be a positive thing to show to the courts. Like, I care so much about the communication. I don't want anything to get lost in the shuffle. I'm going to have a dedicated email address just for communication with my former partner. So that's the recommendation there. Number 2, keep your communication brief and only respond to matters pertaining to the kids, to their well-being, to their activities, health and safety, those things. Keep it very brief and business-like. Narcissistic people are kind of classic at tossing in things that aren't related, whether it's they've gotten into a new relationship or, again, they are berating you or emotionally abusing you via messages. It's important that you don't respond to those things. I guess I'm kind of getting into number 3, just not engaging with those types of personal attacks. because we know at the end of the day, we will never win an argument with somebody who is narcissistic. It's just going to continue to go around and around in circles. And that type of interaction only further harms you, harms your nervous system, and just creates more trauma in your body. So
because you're always on defense mode, right?
Right. Yeah. And you're
Yeah.
always waiting for the next thing. And what am
Mhm.
I going to say now? And so if you do feel the need to defend yourself, if they're saying something about your parenting or something you've done to the kids or whatever that might be, just simply say, that's not true. That way, at least it's documented if you feel the need to document that.
Mhm.
Say that's not true, and just move on. Don't continue to go back and forth.
Right, because anytime when somebody accuses you of or slandering you, there's, of course, the compulsion to defend yourself and bring up the facts and the context and prove why they're wrong or why this isn't true, but that
Right.
just further instigates the whole cycle, right?
It does. Right. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And then the fourth recommendation is to use parallel parenting. And I have more information on what parallel parenting is, but ultimately it is, it's, if you visually picture train tracks, in each parent is a track. There's very few points where those tracks intersect. So you're each parenting the kids as you see fit, besides the really important topics, again, like health and safety, schooling, those key topics that you need to come together on and have some agreement with. So
Mhm.
that's parallel parenting.
Yeah.
And again, all of this comes back to what I have there at the bottom of the slide. You can't begin to heal until you're safe from emotional abuse. It's
Mhm.
very difficult to start the healing process. And this was something that, again, was like an aha moment for me. Like, how can I possibly heal when I'm constantly being barraged with nasty messages, criticisms, all those things? So that's why it's so important you protect yourself. So getting back into why co-parenting with a narcissist doesn't work, like I said, oftentimes things get worse before they get better, and you're going to have, continued emotional abuse and harassment. And then they'll accuse you of not being able to co-parent effectively,
Mhm.
things like that. There's typically a lack of flexibility, where there's a lot of rigidity around narcissistic individuals' thoughts and demeanor, and an attempt to continue to control the other parent. They'll be very, very rigid when it comes to certain topics. And also there's a general lack of boundaries. So narcissists do struggle with respecting boundaries, and co-parenting requires that mutual respect. So that's why
Mhm.
ultimately co-parenting doesn't typically work. And you need to look at something like parallel parenting as an alternative.
Which of these do you think is sometimes the more nuanced to navigate of the three? What do you say?
Um, what do you mean? Can you,
Right. So the lack of flexibility, for example,
yeah.
right? If they're rigid in their thoughts and demeanor, how can that create difficulty in co-parenting on your side, for example? Right.
Yeah, it can create difficulty because oftentimes, like if you're in a normal co-parenting situation, you can agree things like a schedule change. You can
Mhm.
agree things like we're going to flip-flop holidays this year. But when you're dealing with someone who's highly narcissistic, who wants to, you're their kind of their source of supply. They want to get a reaction out of you because it kind of helps fuel them. It makes them feel like they're still in control of you.
Mhm.
um, they'll turn something like that around on you and say, oh, hang on a second, I know I agreed to that weekend where we wanted to switch, but now I just can't do that anymore. And
Mhm.
they'll kind of leave you in a lurch. So those types of things can just be difficult to navigate, and it's why you need to have really clear parenting plans and agreements after, as you're going through the divorce, so that you don't have to have that back and forth and have, make changes to parenting agreements and things like that.
Right, because it's not always it's almost never clean cut. Parenting, even if you're in a
Right.
marriage, right? I mean, things change, plans
Yeah.
change,
Hmm.
circumstances, appointments, things
Yeah.
come up, right? And it's important to be able to problem solve, right?
Right. Yeah.
And shift things around. And that's hard enough when you're trying to co-parent with someone. But parallel parenting, if somebody's going to give you grief at every turn, it really who suffers? The children.
Yeah.
And yeah, so sometimes trying to force a productive conversation just creates more friction.
Right. Yeah. Definitely.
Yeah.
Should we talk a little bit more about parallel parenting and what that means?
Sure. Let's do
it. So I explained this a little bit already, but it goes back to limited and controlled communication. So each parent is handling their own parenting responsibilities, their own household rules without the need to collaborate. So unfortunately, in these scenarios, you're not going to most likely be able to agree a bedtime, or that your kids are eating organic in both homes, or those types of those smaller rules of the household really have to be maintained separately, and you have to kind of let go of the idea of being able to control that in the other household.
Yeah, the idea of being on the same page, right?
Yeah,
the same structure, same expectations.
Right. Some of that you have to let go, unfortunately, but that it's really things besides just major topics. Again, getting back to education, safety, health. Those are the things you should come together on, but otherwise you've got to kind of manage your household how you want to manage it, and let go of the idea of managing their household. The other aspect, again, is setting strict boundaries. So again, the interactions are brief, they're in writing only, face-to-face communication is very limited and sometimes non-existent. And then lastly, like I already kind of mentioned, making sure that your agreements are detailed. You want to be sure that the time sharing, holidays, childcare, education, healthcare expenses, all those things are clearly outlined so that you avoid having to go back and try to agree something, get it entered in court, all of that, because that can be a very long and painful process when you're dealing with somebody who's narcissistic.
And expensive, right? You have to
very expensive.
Time consuming.
So expensive.
And stressful.
Yeah, just unnecessary stress that you don't need.
So thinking ahead, I don't know, have you, maybe you already have created like a checklist, but do you have any, like, do you have a checklist, or are there things that you would say, like, these are some things you definitely want to check off in your agreement on the first go, like to save yourself grief later?
Yeah, I don't personally have a checklist. That's a really good thing. I should probably put something like that together. That'd be a helpful thing for clients to have. I mentioned the big ones here, I think, and I think these are, typical of any type of joint parenting agreement. But yeah, what's the parenting schedule? What's the holiday schedule? What are you doing for childcare? If you're using a third-party app, I highly recommend having that in your agreement, clearly outlined that that's what both parties have agreed. Education, healthcare, who's paying for what in terms of expenses. Mm-hmm. I think those are the biggest ones, but I'm going to make a note because I like the idea of having.
Yeah, because anything could become, you would think would be a slam dunk on both ends, and then ends up being a nightmare. And that could be something simple as the dentist, the doctor you agree on, medical procedures, vaccinations,
religion,
school, religion, sports. I mean, if you're alternating weekends,
can be big. Yeah, activities can be huge. That's an important one I didn't mention.
Extracurriculars, like who's gonna take whom to what, and if it's on their time, maybe they don't agree to it.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
Definitely. I'm gonna
put
something like that together.
Be helpful. That's really great points. I think having a detailed agreement and then limiting the communication, and just like you said, trying to keep your side of the street clean in terms of the parenting. That makes a lot of sense, as opposed to obsessing on how hard the other parent's making things on your end because there's not continuity.
Right.
Potentially, and just focus on what you can control.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a huge learning I think that I had along the way, and that one that I work with my clients on is just letting that piece go. It's hard, but in order to move forward and heal and be the best parent you can, you have to start putting some of that aside. So
yeah, which begs the question though. I mean, as parents, we can understand, okay, so this is where my head has to be. I just have to, work with what I've got, with the hand I'm dealt. But when it comes to the children, parenting the children, of course, different age groups, different developmental stages,
Mm-hmm.
how, how do we manage that end of things? If, a child says, oh, well, at mom's house or dad's house, I don't have to do that, or I don't have to do this. Or if you just maybe notice that they come back after their time with the other parent kind of unstructured, and you have to kind of it takes you a week to kind of get them back on
Mm-hmm.
track. You know what I mean?
Right.
Sometimes,
Right.
how do you navigate those nuances in terms of how you speak to your children, how you relay kind of the challenges of living between two homes?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I think one important thing is, you know, not criticizing the other parent for how they're handling things in their household. Obviously, we never want to put kids in the middle and feeling like one parent's right and one parent's wrong. It's really just trying to put as positive of a spin on it as possible, and just explaining that, you know, your dad and I, or the other parent and I, we're two separate people, and we do things a little bit differently, and that's how he wants to do it in his house, and this is how we do it here, and these are the expectations when you're home. um, and just continuing to try to reward them when they do follow the rules and the things that are expected in your own home.
Mm-hmm.
um,
That's
when they come
strength-based,
back.
right?
Yeah,
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 approach.
definitely,
Absolutely.
definitely, yeah.
Yeah. Praise. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yes, absolutely, yes.
Validation. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It must be hard. I know it's going through a lot,
Right.
and I
Yeah.
really appreciate how how well you're doing with the change, and
Mm-hmm.
you've been really good about your homework and just focus on the things that maybe the children have been able to focus on as a terms of like their own identity, in terms of strength, and
Mm-hmm. Right.
right, because
Yeah. That.
children will internalize a lot, especially before the age of 13. They're not as dichotomous
Mm-hmm.
after
That's
13, but before, it's very much hard for them to see things objectively.
for
Even
sure.
if they say they don't, they know it's not about them, it's still hard for them not to internalize a lot of the
Mm-hmm.
stuff.
Definitely. Yeah. Yes.
So this is what we're all
The help.
wanting to kind of digest here. How, what are the strategies, what are the tips that we can really leverage in order to have successful parallel parenting? Because it is, even under the best of circumstances, it wouldn't be parallel parenting if we were able to co-parent, right?
Right.
If we're in this
Exactly.
if we're in this sandbox, there's a reason, right?
Yeah, for sure. For sure. So, number one, going back to that parenting plan, follow it.
Mm.
We spend all this money in court and we do all the things, we get this parenting plan. It's tempting to deviate from it sometimes, because when you're trying to co-parent with someone who's narcissistic, it's not always bad. It's just like when you're in a relationship with somebody who's narcissistic, there's a cycle to it. You have periods where things are good, where you're getting along and you can communicate well. But just like the abuse cycle, it will cycle through these periods then, where you are devalued again, you're belittled, you're emotionally abused, and it'll
Mhm.
just continue to cycle through. So you've got to try to remind yourself that even in those times where you're tempted to let your guard down and maybe make a change or make a change to the parenting plan, don't do it, because chances are, again, it's going to come back around, and potentially used against you or taken away from you if you did agree something together. So just stick to that parenting plan once it's agreed. Um, Maintain that business-like communication, focusing only on the child-related decisions, and keep the personal topics out of it. And I also included in here, don't quiz your children about what's happening at your ex's house, within your ex's life. Again, you want to try to keep things in your own court. You don't want that happening when your children are in their household and them divulging things about what's happening in your home. So you shouldn't be quizzing them when they come to you.
Mm.
We don't want them to be in the middle. We want them to feel like they're free to enjoy their time with each parent when they're with them. And that kind of leads into don't interfere with the other parent's parenting time. let them enjoy their time together, avoid constantly checking in. I tell my kids, I'm here if you want to call me. You know, you can call me at any time, but I'm not one to have a FaceTime call with them every single day. I want them to enjoy the time that they're with their dad and be able to focus on their time with him. Keep detailed records, of any types of disputes, or again, if you do deviate from the parenting plan, make sure it's well documented through your parenting app communication, so you have some record of that. Be respectful and courteous, even if you don't get that same treatment back. And that kind of goes back to not taking the bait. If you're provoked into an argument, or you're criticized, or things like that, you've got to protect your energy. You got to protect your peace, and you've got to remember, I'm just not going to win this argument. So there's really no sense in going down that path.
Mm-hmm. Which is challenging, because sometimes those two things can be in conflict with one another, right? Keeping detailed records, but also not getting sucked into the arguments, the vortex of slander.
Right. Yeah.
Because there's a temptation. Well, I need to defend myself so that there's a record.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, for your sanity, we know that it doesn't go anywhere. You try and debate with a narcissist.
Right. And that's just where it's simply saying something like, "That's not true. Thank you." I'm done. Just keep it super brief. Yeah. Super brief. Yep. And setting clear boundaries. You've got to establish early on some boundaries around the communication that you will respond to. So I like these three. That number one, the communication must be about the children only.
Mm-hmm.
Number two, it must be in a reasonable tone. So no swearing, no hostility. And it has to be a reasonable request, question, or statement, or it doesn't get a response.
As I recall, Family Wizard has like a like a meter.
Oh, a meter, right? Yes.
The language is getting tense, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like,
yes.
watch it.
Right, and standing firm in that. I think that was something that I struggled with, because you don't want to appear uncooperative, especially if you're in the middle of a divorce, situation. And we all want to be a good co-parent, those of us in this situation. I think I always had hope, and fortunately my situation it's gotten better over the last several years, but we have that hope that things can get better. So it's hard sometimes to stand firm in these boundaries, but the more that you can just be a broken record and say, I won't respond if you're swearing at me, or if you're getting grief about not responding to a message that had nothing to do with the kids, just saying, there was nothing about the kids in there. I don't respond to anything unless it's related to the kids.
And sometimes those things can get mucky, because you might have you have to respond within 24 hours rule, but then if it's not about the kids, then it's not.
It's not getting a response.
Yeah.
But sometimes you have to issue those reminders. So just stand firm in those boundaries. Yeah.
Very good. Very good advice. Absolutely.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you for that.
Hopefully that's helpful for people.
Absolutely.
So
very helpful.
Some sanity through it all can be hard.
Well, I think that is the goal, right? Because co-parenting, parenting in general, is a long game. Now you can lose your, sanity without being in a co-parenting situation as a parent, right?
Yeah.
Parenting can be.
It's hard.
And I would say is stressful.
Absolutely.
But ideally it's stressful in waves and seasons.
Mm-hmm.
But constant, consistent, and unnecessary stress on top of regular parenting stress, when you're dealing with like a co-parent, a difficult co-parenting situation or parallel parenting, really like you said, it can take a toll on the nervous system, because it's like this extra layer of defense. Plus, it has to do with the well-being of your child.
Right.
Not even like a personal thing. It's, protecting your child thing.
Yeah. So your child needs you to be healthy emotionally.
Absolutely. And they're advocate.
Yeah, for sure. So it's so important that you protect yourself.
So I think something that really stands out to me here is, killing them with kindness, being respectful at all times, but also managing that communication with concise, clear, necessary content.
Yeah. It's I like to think of it as just being businesslike, taking the emotion out of it and treating it like it's a business relationship, and you have to handle yourself that way.
Yeah, and that's about self-preservation, your emotions, because as a parent, like we said, it's a long game. And, if you're burnt out, but, when your child is 5 over this stuff, how are you going to be present for them when they're 15 going through
Right.
big person problems?
Yeah. It can really take
If
a
they're
toll.
already burnt out and checked out, but because at that point, you may feel like you're so burnt out at that point. Oh, they're old enough now, they can handle themselves.
Right.
When in reality, we know that teens are some of the hardest transitions kids go through.
Yeah.
And it's when they need you the most, even though they say they don't want you around.
Yeah, for sure. They need you in an emotionally healthy place so you can support them.
Absolutely. And so to do that, you have to keep your cup full, take care of yourself, manage the stress as much as possible with and these 4 fundamentals of co-parenting, as you call it, are kind of the cornerstones of things we want to watch for, right?
Yeah, definitely.
These are the things we want to make sure we're attending to so that we don't burn out, so that we can be present, so that we can attend to the other stuff, the normal stuff, normal stress, right?
Yeah, and just so we can enjoy life, I think when we continue to get pulled into these things and allow it to disrupt us and derail us from our day-to-day things of what we need to do, it's just hard to enjoy life, and we want to be able to enjoy the time we have with our kids, right? I mean, it goes too fast. So
absolutely, it does. It
important.
goes so fast. It's crazy how fast it goes.
I know, it goes very fast.
Yeah.
So
ultimately, we're building relationships, all around, and kids aren't gone once they're grown. The relationship just matures, and we want to have a good foundation for that. So
for sure. Yes, that's the goal, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, we all want that.
Exactly.
So
well, I really appreciate the work you're doing. I don't see any questions here for anybody watching. Let me jump back to Instagram now that the slide's over. If anybody on Instagram, there's about a 12-second delay. But if you're over there or you're on the main feed on YouTube or Facebook, if you have any questions for Susie, now's your time. We'll
ask
give
away.
10 seconds. And we'll have to go.
I wasn't aware of that. I didn't realize there was that delay. So
yeah, on Instagram, I a couple of times actually I've made the mistake of closing this stream before Instagram's had a chance to catch up, or closing Instagram when I close this stream. Yeah.
Yeah, you can always reach out to me, through my website, or I'm on Instagram at Susie Miller-Wendel as well. And my email address is mycoachsusie1@gmail.com. You can feel free to email me any questions that you have there as well. So
great.
Happy to help and happy to answer any questions that people
Thank you so much, Susie.
So yeah.
Wonderful. Well, I appreciate you making time today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having
I'll definitely be putting all the links to your website and your book and everything in the description and the show notes. And so anybody who wants to dive deeper with you has every opportunity.
Great. Thank you so much for that. I appreciate it.
I appreciate you.
All right.
And you keep serving and filling up your cup. Yeah.
I will. I will. Absolutely. You too.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Appreciate you.
Bye. Bye.